Welcome to another reading vlog. So, I will continue to talk to you about I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy, which I started reading last week and will continue to read this week and have been continuing to read, but I'm just taking it very slowly. I'm only reading a couple chapters at a time and then discussing it a lot with my husband. We're like really digging into it. So I'm enjoying reading it that way. It's not a book that I really want to read all at once. So I will have it done by the end of this reading vlog, but I will withhold my discussion with you on it until then. And in the meantime, I have started The Magicians. Oh my goodness. This was in the video 5-star and 1-star predictions books. I obviously wanted to enjoy everything that I talked about in that video, but it was books that I was really anticipating, that I really believed would be 5 stars, and books that I really wanted to read, but I also acknowledged they could be an absolute dumpster fire for me, and that was that video. And this was in it because this is a book that since I first heard about it I've wanted to read, but since I have started saying that I wanted to read it, which I've said several times, every time people comment and say, don't do that, don't read that one. So anyway, I finished book 1. I'm on book 2 now, about to start book 2 now. And I love it, but I also hate it. I have some good friends that have despised this book and fully expected me to despise it too, and I do, but I don't. I love it. So this is probably the most challenging book I've had to talk about in a while because I do equal parts love and hate it. Maybe not equal. I love it more than I hate it, but I do hate it. And to express to you why I have those two very strong feelings, I feel like I need to do an hour-long book review, really just dissecting everything about it, and I'm not gonna do that. I will probably do a series, a trilogy review though, because I've already bought book 2. Anyway, we should talk about the book, right? So anyway, we follow Quincy, who's horribly unlikable, just terrible, and he goes off to this school where he meets other terrible, unlikable people, and it's a magical school, so they have the ability to do magic, and they've been selected to learn how to use it, but it's not like say your words, move your hands or your wand in the right way, or your magical object in the right way, and magic. It's not you're more powerful than you because of reasons. It is a very, I feel like it's books like Narnia, Harry Potter, you know, like magical world, Muggle entering a magical world kind of feel, mixed with The Secret History by Donna Tartt. It's like elitist, snobby, horrible people studying and partying and indulging and being miserable. And like, that's the book. And I love it. He captures the feeling of stepping into a magical world and feeling like my life is made, and then realizing, no, this is almost worse. Like, this does not fix things for me. And I love the scholarly pursuit of magic. I love this non-whimsical take on magic where it's like everything is, you have to work and you have to give yourself to this and you have to suffer to learn it. Like, it's a real, magic isn't something that you just get because you're special. It's something that you have to fight for knowledge of. But then the more that you learn and the more that you're able to use it, the more it kind of corrupts you. Or at least, again, I'm not done with the book yet, but that's the vibe I'm getting, is that these people, half of what makes them so horrible is because of magic. It's changing them. There's a line that says that that magic could potentially be morally stunting them, and I feel that, I see that, and I feel like in their pursuit of magic, they're just kind of losing themselves more and more and more. And a lot of the more obscene scenes in this book, more of the shocking and jarring and disturbing stuff that we see is because they're just looking to feel something. They're looking for some kind of release because of what magic is doing to them. I love it. I feel like this book has captured the feeling of melancholy like I've never read in a book. Is that enticing? Are you excited to read it now? But it's also horrible. There are those very obscene, disturbing, gross scenes in this book, and while I can point to each one of them and I can tell you almost every one of them, I can tell you my interpretation of that scene and why I think it's there and what I feel like Lev Grossman was doing or trying to communicate with it. There are definitely times where I'm like, I don't think he handled it well, though. I don't think he did a good job. I see what he was trying to do, I think, but I don't know that. I think there's a reason people react a certain kind of way sometimes when they read some of those scenes. And then there are other scenes or lines that I can't justify and I won't try to, and I think that it's just distasteful, just not good stuff. So again, some of my friends have read these books, and I've talked with them about it, and they hate it. It's like, I get it, totally makes sense. I kind of hate it too, but I also love so much of what's happening. I love it despite all of the things that I think are not being handled well. All the things that are being handled well are just hitting me exactly right. So I have two minds. Like, I could rant about the book or I could gush about it. Which one do you want? Because I could do both. Both are in this. I'm not even done with it. Like, the second half of this book could be a complete crash and burn. It could set itself on fire and I could hate it more than everything in the world. Or I could power read this entire trilogy, because again, I already bought the second book, and as soon as it gets in the mail, I'll probably be starting it right away. Assuming the second half is worth something, and I think it will be. I don't know. I've been way too excited about a book before at the halfway point, and then completely it ruins itself. So take everything I say, just wait for the next clip, because oh boy, could it all be ruined. But anyway, I don't know. I have no idea how to talk about this book other than to do a spoiler-filled deep dive of it. But I'm gonna wait, I'm gonna do the whole trilogy, because to me, again, I'm only halfway done with the first book, to me, it feels like I see so much of what I think Lev Grossman is trying to do. I see so much of what I think the goal here is, and it has me really excited, and I just want to read, I want to just blaze through all of them so that I can see the whole vision and the whole execution, and then we can just talk. I'm so excited about this book, but I'm also so disturbed by it and upset by it, and it's doing a lot. It's doing a lot. Quincy, I can tell you though, can choke. Quincy can choke, and I will watch it happen. Anyway, I hope you're having a lovely day. Bye. Last night I finished The Magicians. This is the first book in a trilogy. I've already bought book 2. I think I told you that in the last clip. So I said before, I love it as much as I hate it. Here's the thing. The story's excellent. I said in the last clip that it was magical school, learning to magic, but it's all a little bit darker and a little bit more melancholy and all that. I've finished the book now. That's probably a bad description of the book overall, because the magical school, we go through 5 years of school in 200 pages. There's one part where a year and a half passes over the course of 2 pages. Like, the pacing is wonky in this story. The pacing is bonkers. So we go through 5 years of schooling in 200 pages. So this is a 400-page book, at least in my edition. So half of the book is school, and then half of the book is a different adventure that I'm not gonna disclose to you, because even though you've likely already watched the show, I went into this book having not watched the show and not knowing anything about it really. So it was all quite the surprise for me. And when everything came together and I saw how intentionally he's laid out this plot, it was very satisfying. So I just don't want to mess with that for you. So we have school and we have a separate adventure. Now, personally, I would have much preferred if he broke this up into 2 books and he made this a quartet, because I think one of my biggest problems with this book, and I do have many, is that yes, the pacing is wonky, where we'll just rush past major time spans, and then we'll spend an extraordinary amount of time in very mundane things. Sometimes we'll spend time digging into really interesting things, and sometimes it's like and then we got drunk again, and we did a bunch of drugs, and we did this, and it's like we're partying, we're bad people, everybody should hate us because we're obnoxious. Like, that's kind of what we dug into instead of the interesting magical parts. So like, pacing, wonky. The plotting was brilliant. It was amazing. But I don't really feel like I know this world very well at all. Even though I just read 400 pages in it, I don't feel like we dug into what it was like being at school there, except for there are certain events that happened while he was at school that I know well. But as far as the overall school environment and what it took to train to be a magician and knowing the magic better, like, I prefer a soft magic system, so I'm not asking for a hard magic system. But I would like to explore it a little bit more though. And then same for the second half of the book, the adventure that we go on. I really just feel like we speed ran it. Like, I got to encounter magical creatures and scenarios, but I didn't actually, I can't really tell you what that, I didn't live there. I didn't experience it with the characters. So I would have much preferred if the first half of this book were 400 pages and we actually dug into it, and then the second half of the book were 400 pages and we actually dug into it. I realized though that this plot, the way it all came around in the end, that what his goals were for laying groundwork and then making it all pay off at the end and making it all come together wouldn't work in what I said my preference is. But as somebody who's a very, I get really invested in the story, I live there too. I step into the world, I experience it with the characters. Lev Grossman really didn't give me the chance to do that with the way he wrote this book, with his weird pacing and with just kind of breezing past a lot of things instead of letting me live in it. It's a preference, you can disagree, but that is the way that I prefer to read, and because of that, I do feel like this book was a lot of ingenious ideas and concepts that I loved so much with, you know, rough execution. All that said, I loved this book. Like, could be 5 stars. If the execution were a little bit better, and I'm not even talking about splitting it into 2 books, even if he had just made this book a little bit longer, like 500, 600 pages, and just done it well, done it really, really well, 5-star book for me. It's not quite there because I do have many complaints about it, stuff that I've talked about in this clip and the last clip, but despite all the things that I don't like about this book, I loved this book. I loved what Lev Grossman was doing. I loved what I think was the intention behind it all. I love that we have these horribly unlikable characters, especially Quentin. Quentin is just the worst. But by the end of the book, I really do feel an excitement to finish his arc. He is selfish and rude and so he blames everything and everyone else for every mistake he makes. It's the world's fault for not being interesting enough or exciting enough or not fulfilling all of his hopes and dreams that he put on it. It's people's fault for failing him or for not doing enough for him or for making mistakes, and their mistakes are bigger in his eyes than his mistakes, even though he made the mistake first. It was you did it first, Quentin. You can't be mad at her for doing it too. And no, it wasn't worse when, anyway. Blames everybody else whenever anything wrong happens in his life, even if he's the instigator of the wrong. Like, he blames everything but himself when he fails. But at the end, by the end of this book, we're kind of confronting that reality about his characters. So we have these terribly unlikable characters, but it looks like we're gonna do something with that. It looks like, I'm just excited. I'm just looking forward to what's to come. This really felt like a ground laying book, even though it had its own plot and its own story and its own conclusive end. This feels like a ground laying book, and I feel like I can't even fully have, like, I don't feel prepared to have an opinion on it until I've read more, because I feel like I see what Grossman is setting up to do, and it'll depend on execution of the fuller arc in order for me to really contextualize some of the things that happen in this book. So anyway, like I said, I already bought the second book. I bought it used, so it's coming in the mail, but it'll take a while to get here. So I don't know when it's coming, but whenever it does, I'll probably start it immediately. I'm so excited to continue this story. I have a lot of complaints about it, but I loved it. I just really, really loved it. And we could just dig into this book because there's so much, but I want to wait until I have the whole story and then we'll dig in. But yeah, it was really, really good. I'm almost finished with I'm Glad My Mom Died, so we'll talk about that tomorrow. And Yona, we need to talk about Yona, so we'll do that tomorrow too. The Magicians, I don't necessarily recommend it because I don't necessarily recommend it, but I can say that I love it, despite itself. Okay, so there's no B-roll for this particular vlog this week. I have no excuse, it didn't happen. I just didn't take any. I finished I'm Glad My Mom Died. It was such a good book. I mean, obviously it was devastating. This, if you don't know, I talked about it in my last reading vlog, but I'm sure you've heard of it. It's been pretty popular since it's been published. This is my first celebrity memoir that I've ever read. Usually memoirs that I read, or autobiographies, or whatever the right term is, are historical figures, like the Shackleton book that I recently read, Never Been Caught, like books, Island of the Lost was another recent read, books like that, where it's like, these are figures that have passed away a long time ago and compiling information and focusing on one event in their life. Like the Shackleton thing was about the 20 months that they were stranded and trying to find their way back to survival. So that's what I'm more used to reading. I don't know what celebrity memoirs usually look like, but I definitely did not go in expecting here's my whole life, like my 20-some years that I've lived, from childhood to dating to just random occurrences, like here it all is laid out. I'm used to, like, here's an event. So I kind of thought that this was going to be about her abusive mother and abusive Hollywood, the abusive life of child acting is what I thought she was really going to focus in on. But instead, it was more of, here's my life, and those are parts of it, and then you're also going to hear about all the other parts of it. And one thing that I really appreciated that she did was just her complete honesty, or at least that's how it read, about herself. Not just about her family life and about working with Nickelodeon and about dating and everything, but also just about herself. Here's where I failed. Here's where my attitude got really bad. Here's where I started treating fans in a different kind of way than I had established that I would. Here's when I started getting completely disconnected with people and how I would treat them. This whole book is written in a very distant sort of way, where she's just kind of stating facts and not really putting a lot of emotion on anything, which I understand. It's pretty established in the book that there are parts of her childhood that she literally had to disassociate from in order to survive them. Like, in order to get through these traumatic experiences, she actually had to disassociate from her mind and her body. So writing this book, I'm sure, was a lot for her. So kind of disassociating from the emotions of everything makes a lot of sense, why she would choose to write it that way. I had expected more exploration, like a more focused, zeroed in, here's what it was like for me as a child actor, and what, you know, many people have spoken up and have come forward and talked about the abuse within Hollywood for child actors. And I thought she would dig into that a little bit more, which she should write this book however she wants, don't get me wrong. This is her story and she should write it in her way. I'm just talking about my expectations versus reality. It was more of point by point, here's been my life, all of it. Not just the big events, not just the big things that people have come here for, just here's what it's been, here's what I've been, and here's where I am on my track of accepting and recovery and figuring out who I am and where I'm supposed to go from here. Again, this is the first celebrity memoir that I've ever read, so I don't know if that's kind of the norm for celebrity memoirs, that it's less focused and more of just like, here's what my life has been. It's just with the kind of nonfictions I typically read, it was just it was a whole different experience for me. But it was also very, very, very good. I really appreciated her just bluntness, honesty, upfrontness about the way people have failed her, as well as the way that she has, you know, also failed people, and where she ends it all, like where she lands at the end of it, like where the book ends but her journey is continuing, her road to recovery is continuing. It was a very good memoir, autobiography. And like I said, I read it really slowly and I discussed it piece by piece, chapter by chapter with my husband, so that was also a very good experience for me. But it's a really heavy book. I mean, there's a lot that she has gone through, and a lot to unpack there. I have read the next 2 volumes of Yona. They were both excellent. The story, again, like I've said before, it's really just ramping up and kind of becoming what I think it's been building up to be, so I'm really enjoying all of that. I really like when our characters are on the move and when they're actively trying to serve the people that they come encounter with and come across. When they're bonding with each other and when they're learning and figuring out, okay, what's our role in all this and what are we supposed to be doing? How can we be helping people from the position that we're in now, but also in a long-term sense, what can we do to be better leaders? And Yona continues to be an amazing protagonist, which I super did not expect to say when I started this, when I read the first few volumes. Continuing to read Vagabond as well, that continues to also be fantastic, and we are continuing to have our discussions. Actually, the next one on Philip's channel, we're bringing in another person, so there will be 3 of us in on that discussion, I think. But yeah, I'm having a lot. I mean, this series, there's a lot to dig into with it, so I'm really, really glad that this is a buddy read and not something that I'm reading on my own, because there's just so much to unpack with this series as well, and I'm really glad to be doing that with Philip. I'm a Dummy, The Ember Blade. I am about a third of the way through it. Again, since this isn't released on physical, it's only released on audio, I'm just getting through it really slowly. I don't make time for audiobooks as much as I do make time for physical reading. Audiobooks are more like a supplemental thing for me. I especially like it when I can have the physical and audio at the same time, so I can be physically reading in the evening, which is when I do most of my reading, and then the audio can just be, you know, if I'm driving or cooking a meal that's very familiar to me that I've made a dozen times or something like that. That's when I do audio, so it's just small spurts. So the fact that I only have this on audio, I'm just not reading it very quickly, but I am enjoying it. Last time I talked to you about it last week, it was kind of a rough start for me, but it's going a lot better now. I'm really enjoying what's going on. I'm really enjoying what's happening with several of the characters, especially Finn. So Emberblade, forgot to give you an update because I'm just not reading it very slowly, but I'm about a third of the way through, and it's going very well. I said the Emberblade, the Shadow Casket, the sequel to Emberblade. Good content, Murph. So those are the books that I read this week. I finished I'm Glad My Mom Died, which I started last week. I read The Magicians, and I continued on with Yona and Vagabond. Let me know if you want to chat any more about any of this. I post videos every Monday and Friday on my main channel, Tuesdays and Thursdays on this channel. I'll see you again soon. Bye.